Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I've worked night shifts at the Philadelphia Zoo for 6 years. People always imagine it's peaceful, a quiet moonlit stroll among sleeping animals, but in reality, the place never truly sleeps. The animals have their own rhythms, and so do we. Every sound in the dark matters. A scrape on a fence, a sudden chuff from the lions. The faint clink of a padlock shifting as the meadow cools. You learn to listen in layers, separating the normal from the dangerous. That's the job. The zoo covers 42 acres, tucked between the Schuylkill River and the Amtrak rail line. It's old, the oldest in America, which means the infrastructure is a patchwork of renovations from different decades. Some sections have modern hydraulic gates and digital locks. Others still have century-old ironwork that could hold up a battleship. At night, the winding pathways and manicured gardens turn into a labyrinth of shadows, broken only by the glow of security lamps. On this night, I came in early for my shift because of the news. There had been trouble downtown all day, riots, police lines, and reports of some kind of violent outbreak in West Philly. The official channels called it civil unrest, but the emergency alerts were vague, and rumors had been spreading among the staff for hours. Some claimed there were attacks in Fairmount Park. Others said the bridges were being shut down. By 6 p.m., the zoo's day visitors had been hurried out, and we locked the gates an hour early. My post was the carnivore kingdom big cats, hyenas, and the smaller predators in the nocturnal building. My name's David Mercer, but everyone calls me Merc. I've been with the zoo since my 20s, worked my way up from seasonal keeper to night supervisor. On this shift, I had 2 other keepers with me. Ray Carter, an older guy who'd been with the zoo since the 90s and knew every bolt in the tiger cages, and Jill Alvarez, one of our newer hires, quick on her feet and always ready to double-check a lock. The 3 of us were covering the north side tonight, while the south side had 2 keepers and a maintenance tech. We'd barely finished the initial rounds when the first security call came in over the radio. Security Post 2. Merc, be advised, we've got movement on the Girard Avenue gate. 3 individuals moving erratic. PD's not responding to our calls. I frowned. Erratic was one of those words that made the hair on your arms stand up. I asked if they were inside the perimeter. Security. Negative. Still on the street. One just walked into the fence, hard. The guy on the radio sounded unsettled, and he wasn't easily rattled. I told Ray and Jill to stick close and double-check all the enclosure gates. You never assume a disturbance outside won't spill inside, especially when the front gate is only chain link topped with razor wire. It's designed to stop break-ins, not mobs. By the time we reached the lion enclosure, the animals were already uneasy. Mara, our oldest female, was pacing along the fence line, tail flicking sharply. Her ears kept swiveling toward the sound of sirens on the street. Inside the nocturnal house, the servals were standing stiff-legged, eyes wide, and even the fennec foxes had stopped moving. Animals know when something's wrong long before people do. "Merc, you smell that?" Jill asked, wrinkling her nose. I caught it, then a metallic, acrid tang that didn't belong. Not quite smoke, not quite blood, but something sharp enough to stick in your sinuses. It drifted in on the wind from the east. The sound of raised voices followed it, muffled by the walls and the distant echo from the zoo's stonework. The radio hissed again. Security Post 2. They're gone from the gate, but I think one came over. We've got motion by the food services building. I'm going to check. There was a sudden crash over the channel, a grunt, then nothing. Security Post 2, report, I said sharply. No answer. Ray glanced at me. That was Daryl. You know, Daryl doesn't just drop comms. I keyed the mic again. Post 1. Get eyes on Post 2. Now. While we waited for a response, I told Jill to start locking down the inside access doors to the cat enclosures the service passages keepers use to move between night quarters and the yards. If someone was in the park, human or not, we couldn't risk them opening a pen by accident. The reply came from Post 1, voice tight. Post 1. We've got eyes on something. Daryl's down. 2 subjects on top of him, I think. Static, then. Merc, I don't think they're alive. It stopped me cold. Say again. Post 1. I said I don't think they're alive. They're biting him. Ray swore under his breath. Jill's face went pale. The training manuals never cover this. You prepare for escaped animals. Fire, flooding, even active shooters. But you don't prepare for this. I told them both to stick close and keep the heavy gate keys ready. Within minutes, we started hearing it ourselves, the wet, ugly sound of something tearing, carrying faintly over the cold night air. The animals reacted first. The tigers began huffing deep warning breaths, and one of the snow leopards let out a piercing yowl that echoed off the buildings. Then came the gunshot. Just one, somewhere near the front gate. A moment later, the radio crackled again. Post 1. They're still moving. They took a hit to the chest and didn't go down. The channel went dead. At that point, I stopped worrying about chain of command. Ray, get to the service tunnels, lock the steel gates. Jill, with me, we're going to secure the outer perimeter. The zoo's service tunnels run under parts of the park, connecting animal houses to the veterinary wing and storage. Most people don't even know they exist. They're a godsend in bad weather, and a liability if anything gets inside them. If someone or something could use those tunnels, the entire zoo could be compromised in minutes. We reached the main carnivore service gate and slammed the heavy latch shut. The air inside smelled of straw, disinfectant, and the faint musk of big cats. As we worked, I kept catching glimpses of movement through the chain link and mesh shadows passing along the public pathways, not on any staff route. The shapes didn't move like security. They didn't move like thieves either. They moved like predators that had spotted prey. When we circled back toward the lion enclosure, Jill froze. Merc, look. A figure was standing at the far edge of the visitor path. Even in the dim security lights, I recognized the khaki work shirt and the way he stood, one shoulder lower than the other from an old injury. It was Charlie Ung, one of the daytime carnivore keepers. He was supposed to have gone home hours ago. I called out, "Charlie, you okay?" He didn't answer. He just stared, head tilted slightly, mouth open. Then he took a step toward the fence, slow and dragging. That's when the lights caught his face fully, and I saw the streaks down his shirt, the dark around his mouth. Jill grabbed my arm. "Merc, that's not Charlie anymore." We backed away fast. Behind us, the lions had stopped pacing and were now fixated on Charlie, muscles coiled. Mara let out a deep, rumbling growl that made the ground seem to vibrate. Then, without warning, Charlie lunged at the fence, not at us, but at the lions, as if he were trying to get inside. The impact rattled the mesh. Mara roared and threw herself forward, claws scraping the barrier. The sound alone was enough to make your ribs buzz. I keyed my radio with shaking hands. "All units, we have a breach infected on site. Repeat, infected inside the perimeter." The response wasn't immediate. That was never a good sign. In emergencies, silence over comms is worse than chaos. I could hear static in the background, faint bursts of something like shouting. Then nothing. Either they were too busy to respond or they couldn't. Jill's eyes kept darting towards Charlie's figure at the fence, as if she expected him to start climbing. He didn't, not yet. He just scraped one hand down the chain link, fingers curled like claws. His nails caught on the mesh, and for a second it looked like he was testing it. The lions were practically frothing on the other side, pacing in short bursts, their tails lashing. Mara roared again, sharp and furious, and the male, Cato, joined in with a deep, thunderous call that seemed to vibrate through the fence posts. Every predator in the vicinity was awake now. "Merc, we've got to move," Jill said, her voice low but urgent. "If those things get in with the cats—" "I know," I cut her off. "South Service Gate, now." We started toward the main service route, keeping low and using the maintenance hedges as cover. The wind shifted, carrying with it the mingled scents of animal musk, disinfectant, and that strange metallic tang. Somewhere, toward the zoo's main plaza, a metallic crash echoed like someone throwing over a row of garbage cans. Then came another sound higher-pitched, fast, and panicked. It was an animal cry, but not one I recognized at first. It took me a second to realize it was the capuchin monkeys, screaming from their enclosure near the children's zoo. Ray's voice finally came over the radio, ragged and breathless. "Merc, I'm at the tunnel gates. East side secure, but west is compromised. Someone came through the maintenance hatch. I locked it, but they're pounding on it now." "How many?" A pause. "Don't know. At least 3, maybe more." Before I could answer, there was a sharp crack through the comm, not gunfire this time, but the unmistakable sound of a latch snapping under stress. Ray swore. "They're in. Heading your way." Jill and I picked up the pace, jogging along the service road that paralleled the visitor paths. The zoo at night has blind corners everywhere, hedge-lined bends, overhanging walkways, shadowed archways from the old Victorian pavilions. Every turn felt like it could reveal something waiting in the dark. My flashlight beam kept catching Glint's chain-link reflections, eye shine from the nocturnal house, and my nerves were stretched taut. We passed the side gate to the big cat night houses, just as a heavy metallic clang rang out from inside. I froze, listening. The sound came again, not from the service door, but from deeper in, near the secondary keeper corridor. Someone, or something, was inside the building. The cats inside were worked into a frenzy, their roars layered over the deep huffs and growls that usually meant imminent attack. Then came a single human scream from inside, short, cut off mid-breath. Jill's face went white. "Merc." "Keep moving," I said. "We can't help anyone in there without locking down first." It felt wrong to say it, but I'd been in enough animal emergencies to know when rushing in just added more casualties. Whoever had been inside was either beyond help already, or would be in seconds if the cats had been let loose. As we rounded the bend toward the plaza, the glow from the main concourse lights flickered. Normally they're tied into the same backup power as the animal life support systems, but tonight they were pulsing dim, bright dim, as if the power grid itself was under stress. Shadows danced across the paving stones, twisting as if the zoo was breathing. That's when we saw them, 3 figures moving across the plaza near the food court. They weren't in uniform. Their clothes were torn and dark in places where the security lights didn't reach. One's head lolled unnaturally as it walked. Another had an arm hanging useless at its side. And they weren't moving toward us. They were moving toward the sound of the capuchin's cries, drawn like magnets. The strange part was how they moved over obstacles. Benches, planters, even the low railings, they didn't go around them like people would. They went over them, clumsy but relentless, falling and getting up without hesitation, I felt my gut knot. This wasn't random rioter behavior. This was hunting. We skirted the edge of the plaza, heading toward the admin wing. If we could get to the security control room, we might be able to lock down the last access points and keep the infection contained to one side of the zoo. But halfway there, the radio exploded with noise shouts, animal calls, and the piercing alarm of the reptile house breach sensor. That was on the opposite end of the park, nowhere near where we thought the infected were. Ray came through the chaos. Something's opening gates. We've got zebra and antelope loose on the south lawn, and he broke off, and I heard his breathing pick up. I think the hyenas are out. The hyena enclosure is a nightmare if unsecured deep moat walls and only a narrow keeper bridge for access. If the gates were open, they could range half the park before anyone stopped them, and unlike some of the other animals, hyenas don't spook easy. They're opportunistic, clever, and strong enough to crush bone. We're heading to control now, I said, though I wasn't sure we'd make it. Halfway to the admin wing, Jill grabbed my sleeve and yanked me down behind a concrete planter. "Look," she whispered. Through the hedge, I saw two shapes loping along the path, low, fluid, and silent. Not people. They paused under one of the sodium lamps, and the light hit spotted coats and narrow, powerful heads. Two hyenas, side by side, moving with the confidence of animals who suddenly had no boundaries. They sniffed the air, then turned toward the direction of the plaza toward the three infected we'd seen earlier. I don't know what I expected, maybe that the hyenas would attack immediately. Instead, they hung back, studying the infected from a distance. One let out a soft, eerie whoop, a sound that normally signals to the rest of the clan. But tonight, it just echoed into the night, unanswered. "Merc," Jill said quietly. "This isn't going to stay contained." She was right. The zoo was a maze of high fences and locked gates for a reason, but those barriers were built for people and animals who obeyed the laws of biology. The infected weren't following any rules, and now we had predators moving freely between sectors. The whole place had turned into a predator's playground, and we were trapped in the middle. I keyed my radio again. "Ray, change of plan. Forget containment, we're heading for an exit." Static. Then, faintly, "Too late. East gate's gone. They're coming in from the street." The realization hit me hard. The zoo was no longer an isolated breach. Whatever was happening out there in the city had spilled fully inside, and the high walls we'd relied on for years were now just keeping us inside with everything else. The thought snapped my focus into something cold and narrow. No more containment. No more holding the line. Survival was the only plan left. The roar of the lions carried across the park, followed by a strange crashing sound from the big cat night house. It wasn't the clean, metallic ring of a keeper opening a gate. It was irregular, heavy, like something battering its way through. Then came the unmistakable screech of claws on steel, and the deep, guttural snarl of a cat that was no longer separated from whatever had set it off. Jill's eyes met mine, and I didn't need to say anything. We both knew what that meant. At least one predator was out. "South service hatch," I said, already moving. "We go underground, cross to the vet wing, and take the west tunnel to the maintenance yard. That's our only shot at a clear exit." The tunnels had always been my least favorite part of the job. They were narrow in places, lined with concrete that held onto the smell of years' worth of feed, bedding, and animal musk. The main ones were lit by overhead fluorescents, but there were side branches, older passages that were barely lit at all. Some keepers joked about them being haunted. I never believed it, but tonight they felt like a place where bad things could follow you, and you'd never know until it was too late. We kept to the service road until we reached the access point near the small carnivore complex. My master key slid into the latch, and the heavy steel door swung open to reveal a flight of concrete steps leading down into a dim corridor. The air was cooler here, with the hum of ventilation fans somewhere deep in the system. I closed the door behind us and threw the inside bolt. It wouldn't stop anything determined, but it would buy us time. We moved quickly, our footsteps echoing down the tunnel. The floor was painted with a yellow center stripe to keep foot traffic organized during busy days, but tonight it just felt like a line that didn't matter anymore. Doors branched off at intervals, each marked with numbers and the names of enclosures above CMV2 for the civet and mongoose quarters, FX4 for the foxes, Viet Prep for the medical staging room. Halfway to the vet wing, we ran into Ray. He was coming from the opposite direction, carrying a crowbar in one hand and a roll of heavy-duty zip ties in the other. His coveralls were streaked with something dark, and I didn't want to ask if it was blood. "They're in the tunnels now," he said without preamble. "Came through the busted west hatch. I slowed them down, locked 2 security grates, but they're still moving this way." "How many?" I asked. 5 that I saw. Might be more behind them." We didn't have the luxury of turning around. If the infected were between us and the maintenance yard, our only option was to reach the vet wing and see if the side exit there was still clear. From there, we could try for the west tunnel, but I wasn't counting on it. As we moved, I noticed the animals housed near the tunnel were restless. You could hear them even through the walls, the civets hissing. The foxes letting out sharp, rapid barks. In one pen, something slammed against the steel inner door hard enough to make it ring. The vet wing was ahead now, marked by the wider corridor and the faint antiseptic smell. We rounded the final corner and found the outer door shut, but the security panel dark. No power. That meant the electronic lock was dead. "Manual release," I said, kneeling beside the panel. The older doors had mechanical overrides, a recessed lever you could pull if you knew where to look. My fingers found the slot, yanked hard, and the bolt retracted with a loud clunk. The door swung open into the prep room. Tables were overturned. A tray of instruments scattered across the tile. A small refrigerator lay on its side, its door half open. In the corner, one of the large kennels was empty, its latch hanging loose, bent as if someone had kicked it open. Then I saw the smears on the floor. They were wide, streaked toward the far wall, and clearly dragged. We crossed the room fast, aiming for the side exit that led to the open-air loading area. I cracked the door and peered out. The yard beyond was lit only by a single security flood, its beam cutting across the cracked asphalt. I could see the chain link of the west perimeter, and beyond that, the dark outline of the maintenance trucks. For a moment, it looked clear. Then movement at the far edge caught my eye. Not infected an animal. Low to the ground, shoulders rolling with each step. The light caught a tawny coat and rounded ears. A lioness, moving slow and deliberate, head low as if stalking. "Back inside," I whispered, closing the door softly. We couldn't risk crossing the yard with her out there, not without a distraction, and not with the noise that lock would make when we unlatched it. Ray swore under his breath. "We're boxed in." Before I could answer, the sound of footsteps came from the tunnel behind us. Fast, unsteady, with the irregular scrape that meant one foot was dragging. Then came more too, 3 sets. They were coming from the direction we'd just come, and they weren't trying to be quiet. Jill's eyes darted from the door to the tunnel and back. "Merc." I was already moving toward the storage cage in the corner. Inside, on the top shelf, I knew there was a flare kit and a box of sealant charges, the kind used to fasten or patch chain link in emergencies. Not weapons, but tools. Tools could be used. I grabbed the flare kit and tossed one to Ray. "We light these, throw them into the yard, draw her off. Then we move." The footsteps were closer now, maybe 30 feet away, just around the bend. I could hear the wet rasp of their breathing, the occasional dull thud as they hit the tunnel wall. Jill had the bolt ready. I cracked the door again, the lioness still in view. I yanked the flare's cap and struck it hard. The red flame burst to life, spitting sparks, its harsh light throwing shadows against the asphalt. I hurled it to the far side of the yard. The lioness's head snapped toward it instantly. She hesitated, then padded toward the light, curious but cautious. "Go," I hissed. Ray shoved the door open and we slipped into the yard, keeping to the fence line. The lioness was focused on the flare now, batting it once with a paw before backing off at the heat. We were halfway to the gate when the tunnel door behind us banged open. The metal slammed against the wall with a hollow clang, and the sound carried far in the open space. The lioness's head whipped toward it instantly, ears flat, tail stiffening in a sharp twitch. A figure staggered out of the tunnel, tall, broad-shouldered, his zoo-issued coveralls ripped at the thigh. His skin had that mottled, ashy tone I'd seen in Charlie earlier, and his head turned in quick, unnatural jerks, scanning for movement. Two more shapes followed, their silhouettes jerky against the tunnel light. The smell reached us next, that same metallic tang in the air, now heavier, mixed with the sour stink of sweat and decay. My grip tightened on the bolt cutters slung in my hand. It was the only thing I'd grabbed before we ran. The lioness didn't charge immediately. She crouched low, watching them. The infected noticed her at almost the same time they noticed us, and then the whole yard erupted. The first infected broke into a run toward us, limbs flailing but gaining speed. The lioness lunged, not toward us, but toward the closest infected, the sound of her snarl tearing through the air like fabric ripping. She hit him broadside, taking him to the ground in a tumble of claws and teeth. The other two froze for half a heartbeat, then moved toward the fight, drawn by movement and noise. Ray didn't wait for my call. He sprinted for the gate, and Jill was right behind him. I kept to the fence line, eyes locked on the latch ahead. It was one of the old sliding bar types, not a quick release. My hands shook as I pulled it up and shoved the gate open just enough for us to slip through. We didn't dare swing it wide, the noise would be too much. The sounds from the yard grew more violent, a horrible blend of animal growls and guttural human sounds that didn't sound like any words. Something heavy hit the asphalt, and I risked a glance back. The lioness was still on top of the first infected, but the second had gotten hold of her flank, clawing and grabbing without any instinct for self-preservation. She swung her head and clamped down on him, but the third was already closing in. I turned away. We didn't have the time, and the noise alone would bring more from across the park. We slipped into the maintenance lane outside the yard, a narrow asphalt path running between two high fences. It led straight toward the west perimeter, where the storage sheds and old generator house stood. Beyond that, if the outer gate was intact, there was a service road that could take us toward the rail tracks. If the city was as bad as the zoo, that wouldn't be safety, but it would be outside. Ray slowed just enough to catch his breath. We need to seal that yard behind us. If the infected get through, they will. I cut him off. That door is not rated to stop anything human. We reached the generator house, and I stopped dead. The chain-link gate that should have been padlocked was hanging open, the chain on the ground. Inside the narrow lot, one of the sheds was standing open. Its contents spilled across the ground: feed bags, coiled hoses, a toolbox. Something moved in the shadows by the far fence. At first, I thought it was another infected, but the movement was wrong, slower, heavier in the shoulders. Then it stepped into the weak light from the generator housing, and I saw stripes. A tiger. It was one of the males from Carnivore Kingdom, massive, his coat glowing orange in the spill from the security light. His ears were back, his mouth slightly open in that low, deliberate way that wasn't a roar, but an assessment. His eyes weren't on us yet. He was watching something in the dark on the far side of the fence. I signaled for Ray and Jill to keep quiet and move low. We edged along the opposite wall, giving the tiger as much distance as possible. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Even a half-grown cub could outrun us, and this male was full-grown. From somewhere beyond the fence, a burst of shouting and banging rang out infected, maybe more than one, hitting something metal. The tiger's head snapped toward the sound, and in 2 silent strides he was at the fence, pressing his nose to the mesh. Then, without warning, he leapt upward, paws hitting the fence halfway up, the mesh groaning under his weight. That was our opening. We slipped past the shed and through the open gate, heading for the perimeter. The outer gate was ahead now, its bars still in place. Ray dropped to one knee to pull it free, but before he could lift it, a sound came from the opposite side, the shuffle and scrape of feet on gravel. A hand shot through the gap in the bars, pale and clawing, fingers straining toward us. Then another. Then more. They were already outside. "Back!" I hissed, pulling Ray away from the gate. "We can't go through there." The only other way out from this lane was the storm drain outlet behind the generator house. Normally it was locked with a steel grate to keep animals from getting in or out, but the last time I'd checked, the padlock was half rusted through. It emptied into the embankment near the rail line. We doubled back, the sound of the tiger's snarl echoing from somewhere behind the sheds now. Jill reached the drain first and yanked at the lock. It gave with a metallic snap, and we shoved the grate open. The tunnel beyond was barely tall enough to crawl through, the smell of damp concrete and stale water thick in the air. I went in first, the flashlight beam bouncing ahead on the curved walls. The sound of footsteps, too many, too fast, was growing behind us, along with something heavier, like claws on asphalt. I didn't look back. The drain curved left, then right, before narrowing into a final stretch toward the faint glow of moonlight at the far end. My knees and palms were slick with whatever had pooled in here over the years, but the air ahead was fresher, the scent of wet grass drifting in. We reached the outlet and tumbled out onto the embankment. The rail line was 50 yards downslope, cutting through the dark like a steel scar. The city skyline was visible beyond, flickering in patches where fires burned. For a moment, we just stood there, catching our breath. Then Jill said what we were all thinking. Where do we even go now? I didn't have an answer. The zoo was behind us, but the city was in front of us, and from the sounds drifting up the slope, neither side of the fence was safe anymore. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.